Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. It's an engaging and enlightening talk show on life, relationships, and the business of life. Grab a cup of juice and just chill. Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. Live life. Live fully.
Good to have you on the show. This is Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. I'm the host of Omobola Stephen, where we share mindship conversations that is going to pivot the positive changes and transformation you and I need. Now, on Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen, we offer disruptive yet constructive mindship conversations from expert professionals, thought leaders who are adepts in these topics, pivoting the changes that you need indeed as we traverse through this life. Now, we emphasize the importance of us embracing personal development and self-improvement, focusing on it because when we personally develop ourselves, we realize that we get to find ourselves along the way. And such a sense of fulfillment and joy when we truly find who we are, and also maximizing and harnessing what we find out by of the gift set potentials that lies within us can only come to the fore, be harnessed and maximized for our own benefit when we focus and be intentional about discipline ourselves and also personally developing ourselves. Now, this is the cause of the matter and the focus of Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. And now, thank you, Lauren Friedman, for joining me on the show today. Great to have you. Now, Lauren is the founder of the LFE and advocates for ethical healing. And now, we want to talk about the ethics of emotional regulation, which is really to consider nervous system awareness as a foundation for ethical action in a world that normalizes burnout, commodifies healing, and rewards reactivity over reflection. Great to have you, Lauren, and thanks for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exactly my mission too, is to help people find ways to find healing in any capacity. I started the company called the LFE, but it seemed like a good idea at the time in June of 23 after losing my job for the sixth time with my whole team company. And I've been on a healing journey, arguably my whole life, but specifically since 2013, I've been trying to figure out why my body has been gaining an exorbitant amount of weight. So in doing this, I have all these different ways to showcase ethical healing and nervous system regulation, because that's truly the foundation of sanity and anything in society. If everyone worked on their nervous system regulation, the violence would be cut out. There would be less divorce. There'd be healthcare premiums that are lower. Illnesses, chronic illness would be solved. Cancer, autoimmune diseases, everything stems from dysregulated nervous systems, wars, people just taking advantage of each other, narcissistic relationships, abuse, emotionally immature parents. All of these things live inside us. So I went to market with something I've rebranded a few times. I might actually rebrand again towards the Why Go project. It's an overarching theme. Maybe someday another human won't feel as alone. I recently launched a podcast with the same name, and eventually I'm scaling out a pediatric complex trauma foundation with the same name. Maybe someday another child won't feel as alone. It's from a Pearl Jam song, and eventually I'm going to need to get their approval. But right now, I'm trying to help as many people as possible. And I call myself the Trauma Translator for speaking engagements, because I'm able to help people find ways to understand abstract or really difficult ideas that I used in my 20-year career in advertising and technology to explain data fidelity and quality across varying levels of audiences' understanding. And also the How Are You Healing Revolution, which is just a thought starter and an homage to both of my parents who aren't alive, who tried to help people heal their whole lives but never found any healing themselves. So they're guiding me spiritually on this, and I really feel grateful and blessed to find this level of healing. It's something that doesn't end. It's not beautiful every day. It requires nervous system regulation every minute of every day, but it is the most worthwhile thing that I've ever done in my life. And I'm so grateful for this. And I want everyone to experience some level of healing, which is the whole mission of the How Are You Healing Revolution. It's to try something once, and then you could build upon it and just see what you like. And when you're ready, I have community connections and resources for you, because it's really hard to find those different modalities, and people don't know where to go or can't even identify, let alone speak about what they've been through to process it. So you don't have to talk about it. You just have to get it out of your body. And so that's one of my main focuses here because I was raised by two therapists and I was in therapy since I was 5 after my dad's first suicide attempt. I'd been having somatic responses to trauma since I was under 2, and no one understood it because they didn't understand the mind-body connection outside and trauma outside of the battlefield until very recently. So I was diagnosed at almost 40 with being in lifelong survival mode while I was in adrenal fatigue, having PTSD episodes, flashbacks, wetting the bed. I've never taken a psychiatric medicine in my life. It affected my thyroid. So I feel really grateful to be on the other side. It's terrifying because it's something that everyone is dealing with in these really high performing burnout lifestyles. And if you don't have the ability to reset your nervous system, then you're just going to continue on this path of chaos and destroy yourself and everybody around you. And you don't even mean to.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for that rich introduction and background. But really, for the benefit of the audience, we'd like to know the full meaning of LFE.
Yeah, it's the Lauren Friedman Experience.
All right.
Yeah, it's the Lauren
Good to
Friedman
know.
Experience. That's why I think I'm going to rebrand towards the Why Go project because that's ultimately what I'm trying to do is have people feel less alone. I'm actually partnering with another organization that helps entrepreneurs feel less alone. It's called the Lonely Entrepreneur. So there's a lot of ways that I want people to feel less alone in their struggles because being lonely is actually more of an epidemic than type 2 diabetes. And that's ultimately my body felt unsafe and alone my whole life, and I didn't know it because I was surrounded by people and I was born with a bright, big smile. So when you think about nervous system regulation, you have to consider outside factors beyond just you and your body, which, this is the whole purpose of your mission as well.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of taking responsibility for emotions, some school of thought opines that emotions are involuntary and thus is does not subject to moral evaluation. Now, other school contend that individuals can and should take responsibility for how they experience and express their emotions. Now, what's your take on this?
I mean, I think that emotions are just the basic foundation of being human. I wasn't able to ever feel emotions because I was taught implicitly and explicitly that I wasn't allowed to have emotions. So when I didn't have emotions, I abandoned myself in all these different ways to try to help what was going on in my life. And I actually, that's where addictions come from. I stopped drinking a few years ago and I realized my issue is sex and love. I was addicted to work. I was addicted to caretaking and helping others. I was addicted to all these different ways to abandon myself. Food, like you're just protecting yourself, all these ways to escape and protect yourself. So everybody is dealing with this, and not a lot of people understand how to regulate their emotions or even feel their emotions because as a society, we're taught to not have emotions. We're supposed to be stoic. We're not allowed to talk about what's going on outside our house. We're not allowed to help. We're supposed to be superheroes, but that's not the reality. We're human. And there needs to be a foundational education as part of society at a young age, which is one of my inspirations for the Pediatric Complex Trauma Foundation is to teach kids how to get emotions out of their body. So I do something called EMDR as part of my trauma work, but I do like all these other different things, and somatics is part of that. And I really do believe that a simple way for people to regulate their emotions and be able to feel them is without having to overwhelm themselves in a moment is really through a somatic experience just to start. And that to me is something that I feel like is palatable across everybody. If you could just move in a simple way, like swinging these 2 rings, I actually just posted about it on my Instagram this morning. But swinging these rings, it's bilateral stimulation. That's a really good way to release emotions. You still have to process, right? You can't just like release them and expect them to not ever come back. But in a moment, let's say you're at work or school or driving, you have to find a way to get your body out of that fight or flight state or fawn or freeze and be able to get yourself back to a regulated nervous system. But if you don't have a baseline for normal, then how do you know what a regulated nervous system feels like?
All right. Still talking about taking responsibility for emotions. Really, we don't have voluntary control over our emotions. And I know that you agree with me on that, as we have over our actions, which is really obvious. So how can it be morally wrong or even blameworthy to feel them?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, one, identify that they exist. You have to be able to be receptive that you're allowed to have emotions and then actually understand that when they're coming in, what to do with them. Because you can't control your emotions. You absolutely can't. But like about having them, but you can control your reaction to it. And that is the beauty of healing. And that's always what I've learned is I can't control other people, but I can control my reactions to them. But that's what psychotherapy teaches you. And psychotherapy is what isn't a standalone solution. You need to have some type of trauma-informed engagement, whether it's through a therapist formally or through a coach or even through some somatic practice. So to me, I really do believe in the value of education and why it's important to, when you do feel those emotions, to process them, sit with them, and then release them out of your body. Because when you don't do those things, that's when you get sick, or that's when your life crumbles around you. And that's when you end up hurting the people around you and getting them into financial trouble that you didn't mean to, or screwing them in some type of legal engagement. And those are all things that have happened to me in my dysfunctional family relationships with both my in-laws, and I'm now divorcing, but my husband's a wonderful man, but we still have to get divorced, and in my family. So these are all products of generational trauma that is not being addressed properly, that lives at a cellular level. And sometimes people think they had a perfect life and everything's going great, but your body is still responding to what's happening and you might not be aware of it. So in order to identify them, you have to actually even allow them to exist. And that's really hard to do sometimes. It took me a really long time to be able to feel sadness and cry. Like I buried both of my parents and spoke at both of the funerals, and I didn't cry until 2022. And it really was until like 2023, 24 that I was able to like cry without having to think about it. I didn't even know how to breathe before 2022.
Great to know, Lauren. So, what's your take on emotional exhaustion and dysregulation? Do these two represent signs of systemic strain and not a personal failure?
I don't think there's any personal failure in any of those things. I think that it's a societal failure of not teaching people and giving them the proper resources and education and support. I really don't think there's ever a personal failure, like unless you're actively doing something to destroy your life or someone else's. And even then, you could find ways to forgive yourself and move forward, right? We can't be stuck in these blame cycles. So I think that's number one, is that personal failure isn't something that I want to talk about as it pertains to emotional regulation, just in my opinion. I really do believe though that it's societal, it's a function of jobs, it's glamorized in movies like forever. Like I was traveling like 3 weeks a month, 5 flights a week one time, for years on business, not one time but for years on business. And it was a function of fight or flight. I couldn't stand being home, because if I was at home, I was literally going to fight with my husband over the situation that's still destroying my life right now, even though we separated and we have to get divorced. So, and this is like going back 10 years plus. So I do believe it's glamorized. It's also, you have to, like, in order to provide yourself and keep up with what's going on, just to pay your bills these days, you have to work hard. But you don't have to kill yourself doing it. You could find some level of balance so that when you feel activated, and you have to understand what that feels like, then you could get yourself back to a baseline. And that's my whole mission, is to help people get back to a baseline, because healing is just the ability to actually flow between different states of activation, dysregulation, and regulation. It's actually a word that I'm sure you're familiar with the word agile, right? Well, there's a word called vagile, which means the actual body response to flowing between those states. So the vagus nerve is actually named nerve because it's vagile, and it actually goes back and forth between states of dysfunction and function, and stability and instability. So I think that, to me, the nervous system regulation is the key to everything in society, if you simplify it.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, sure. Now, still talking about a nervous system regulation. How can we better understand how our emotions and the nervous system influence behavior and also interactions, and making conscious choices that promote well-being and respect?
I mean, I believe in the power of therapy. I always have. I know I just said that, psychotherapy isn't a panacea. It's not, but it's a first step, right? Not everyone's ready for trauma therapy, but I really do believe in the power of a trauma-informed engagement of some degree. And that, to me, is where it first starts, because once you start to be connected to yourself, I always say connection changes everything. And when you have the ability to connect to yourself, connect to your body, connect to a higher power, you start making decisions out of self-love. And then when things aren't working for you, you don't retract, you don't retreat, you don't ignore, you don't avoid these really hard conversations. You just say, hey, I'm sorry, I can't be a party to this, or whatever that looks like. So you're not, projecting your own dysfunction onto other people. So to me, it's all interrelated. And it starts with identifying that you need some support and you need help, and everybody has something from which to heal, and not everyone can identify it. So when you look at things through a trauma informed lens and you start connecting with your body, you start looking at how your body responds to different environmental variables. And you might think that a specific situation is really healthy for you until your body tells you otherwise. And if you're not in tune with it, then you have no ability to understand what's really happening. But trauma, which is just another word for stress that overwhelms your ability to cope, and that looks different for everybody, right? Which is why trauma responses are also different for everybody, because they're disparate. They're not able to be actually measured or look like each other. So that's why no one ever picked up on that for me for almost 40 years, because I was so high functioning. But if you start to look at it like that and start to really understand that, like, hey, my fidgeting right now is really a function of me being exhausted. I've been going nonstop all day. After this, I have to take a somatic break and I have to reset my nervous system before I do more work. But a previous iteration of me just plowed through everything. I never stopped to breathe. I didn't even know I could pause. I didn't even know what capacity is. So I think it's also beyond a trauma informed approach and therapy. You also have to understand your own capacity and be realistic about the things and people and places that you surround yourself with. And obviously it's hard when there's toxic environments in work or in your family life, or you are a parent or a caretaker, and everyone has to find some way to reset their nervous system. So it's just being aware of it, number one, getting the proper resources, and then being able to connect with yourself in those moments so that you don't make other people's lives terrible because you can't deal with your own problems.
All right. Now, Lauren, so what day-to-day tools can you provide to the audience of the show, like we lead by Omobola Stephen, for emotional intelligence or emotional regulation, I beg your pardon, in service of collective healing and also co-regulation and shared resilience?
Yeah, I mean, so that's actually my whole mission, is to help people provide tools, resources, and support. Um, I actually just did I talk about this already? I don't remember. Uh, but I actually just, these smoothie rings are a really good way to activate a bilateral stimulation while you're walking. I have a partnership with a company called Camuso that I actually found out about at my trauma retreat in 2022, where I learned how to breathe for the first time. I learned I had a 39-year stomach ache. I have all these crazy stories that just from having a baseline and just not feeling unsafe. Like, I thought that I felt peace for the first time, but it really was safety. So learning how to breathe and just reset your nervous system when you're feeling activated, when you're in a really stressful situation, or even if you're like, there was a time where I couldn't even leave my apartment to like go outside because I knew too many people. So if you're going into a meeting or you're going to an event and you feel overwhelmed, or you're going to just a family dinner or just walking outside, you might want to take a few deep breaths. There are ways that I'm teaching people to regulate their nervous system through breathing, through different modalities of healing, because there's so many different ways to heal. And everyone needs a toolbox. You can't just choose one thing. You have to have a variety of different practices, because not everything works in that moment, and you need to know what works in that moment to be able to be fluid and agile across your nervous system. So one of the other ways too is through, I call this I call it merch with a purpose, that it's healing centered tools that are also anxiety relief, and they also can help you co-regulate and make sure that your body stays hydrated, or even just making sure that whoever you're engaging with is also on that same wavelength, right? You need to protect your energy. So I think that that's a really important thing to remember, that not everybody wants to find healing. Not everybody wants to find nervous system regulation, and you can't force people into doing it. They have to want to do it on their own. And, for me, it came as a point of desperation. Like, I had to do this. I was having flashbacks and wetting the bed while I was interviewing at the biggest companies in the world. And I still secured a job, but I was really unwell. And thank God we were in a remote environment. So to me, this isn't just a passion project. This is literally like why I was born, to help others find this level of healing and support to get through these really tough moments. And sometimes it's just everyday life.
Lauren, when you mention, excuse me, when you mention learning how to breathe, how do you mean by that?
So breathing is an autonomous response in your body that I always thought my body just did. But I didn't realize that I wasn't taking time to breathe. I wasn't even breathing. I would just talk so quickly, which I can get wrapped up in doing that. But that's also a function of growing up in a dysfunctional household. and having chaos around you that you just have to like get it out quickly. But it's also a function of not wanting to breathe out loud and not wanting to be present because you're so afraid of existing. And I didn't even know that was something I felt until I got to the, well, one, I started EMDR and trauma informed therapy in the winter of 22. And I went to this trauma retreat in August of 22. And I walked in there, and the first day, the first session, they asked us to put our hands on our heart and our stomach. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't even touch myself. I was the only person in the whole thing of like 50 plus people that couldn't do it. And then I learned that I wasn't able to breathe out loud. And it's because I was afraid to exist. And I was paying all these people, like personal trainers, doctors, all kinds of people to tell me to breathe. And I didn't want to breathe because I was afraid to breathe out loud. So there was a long time that I didn't know how to breathe. And there are certain types of breathing techniques like box breathing and certain types of hold processes that allow your nervous system to actually go into a parasympathetic state, which is a rest and digest, versus a sympathetic state, which is the freeze, fight, flight, or fawn. And that's something that's necessary from an evolutionary standpoint. You need to get things done. You can't always be in a rest and digest, but that's also what is dysregulation. So the ideal is to be able to flow between them, and breathing is one of the core ways to do it. I actually had to, yoga used to make me full of rage, and my doctor required me to do yoga. And I ended up, like, she actually required me to do yin yoga. And I couldn't even get through one class at first. And she's a lead by example. She actually came with me. She was my friend first from CrossFit, who solved almost 4 decades of disparate somatic responses. So when I was forced to actually come to terms with, I needed to start my yoga practice, I fell in love with yin because yin forced me to breathe. Yin yoga, it focuses on fascia, it focuses on getting trauma out of your body. It focuses on stretching and holding positions. I've learned so much on and off the mat that I've translated to my life because it's been revolutionary to understand how to be in my body, but breathing is the first step in that. So it's a combination of yoga and meditation. I actually got a certification in it in the winter of 24 because I love it so much. So from someone who yoga used to make me full of rage to getting a certification less than 2 years later, I would have to say it's magic. And a core component of that is breathing. And it's hard to do it on your own. So when you have classes or you have some type of trauma-informed coaching that focuses on regulating your nervous system through breath work, it changes everything.
Do we stay emotionally regulated while contributing to social change?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the first step, is to go into any engagement with a regulated nervous system, because that's the only way to affect change in any way. If you go in with a dysregulated nervous system, you're not going to ever achieve what you're looking to achieve in that moment. So if you want to affect change in a society standpoint, even within yourself, within your own little group, whatever that looks like, you need to make sure that your nervous system is in a parasympathetic state. And that's the key to healing, and that's the key to affecting change and helping others heal. Because a lot of people also get nervous about it. They don't like the word healing. Healing is just another word for finding new healthy ways to solve for old problems. And lots of times old problems look like new problems. And the way you could solve them is through nervous system regulation and getting in touch with yourself. Because once you have the ability to do that, you make decisions that are better for everybody, because you're not making decisions from a dysregulated state. So I truly believe in the power of literally mask on first, work on yourself, and then you can help others. Like I've always overextended myself, which is also a function of people pleasing, of working for love, of trauma, of being all alone my whole life and always wanting to help others. So when I went to market with this, everybody that's always used and abused me for years, used me as their therapist, used me as whatever, their recruiter, I'm like, hey, you have to pay me. And because I need to make money, because I lost my job and I'm starting this business, and people don't want to do that. So I think it's really also a function of being respectful, mutually respectful of others, having emotional intelligence, being able to find resources for yourself to get through those moments, so that then you could help others find their resources. Because people get really scared about the word trauma, but the whole goal here is, for me, is to help the whole world find some type of healing. And I know that's a lofty goal, but I think between what you're doing, what I'm doing, all the other people in the space, we could really do that. And it all starts with a regulated nervous system. You can't do anything in a dysregulated state.
Right, good to know. Now, Lauren, do you have any exciting news, perhaps the project you think it's going to add value to the audience of the show? You can share them if you have any.
Yeah, so I think I just mentioned that I recently started a strategic partnership with the Lonely Entrepreneur, who is focused on helping entrepreneurs and founders feel less lonely in their lives, which is amazing because these are all resources that I've been struggling with so much that have just exacerbated the prolonged volatility in my life. So I'm so happy to have found that, and I'm building out an affiliate team for that, which is so exciting. They're also helping independent musicians and veterans and other types of underserved communities that I've also been focusing on, and tying back mental health to physical health as well. So we're speaking the same language. I just rebooted the Why Go Project pod on YouTube, and also all other places that you can find podcasts. Then I'll be uploading another episode later today. Some of the other audio got messed up from the third episode, so don't judge us on talking over each other. It just got messed up from a Wi-Fi connection. And I also am rolling out, my full platform further. So if people want to join the How Are You Healing Revolution as a resource hub, they could do that and be a part of the whole WIGO project LFE ecosystem, and really help others find ways to find healing and promote your business, and be on the podcast and hold workshops so that everyone, I want to democratize healing for everybody. This community is free for participants. The only people that have to pay it's $100 for the year are the subject matter experts, and you get a whole ecosystem of cross promotion. And people need this more than ever. Everybody needs to find a way to regulate their nervous system. So that's why I really wanted to make the community free, because so many people I know can't afford that. Times are really tough right now, and they're tough for me too. And I don't want there to be a barrier to entry. There's enough barriers to entry in this world that I really believe in the power of healing. And I know that there's a way out. And I never thought that I could find this level of peace, especially in the unknown and chaos. But I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And I believe it's my sole purpose mental health mission to share with others. This is why I was born.
Absolutely. Good to know. Thanks for sharing that with the audience. I sincerely wish you best of luck in this project and in subsequent ones that you embark upon. You like to share your social media handles and your website so the audience can connect and learn more about you and all that you've been up to lately.
Yes, thank you. So it's the-LFE on YouTube. My website, it's also the-LFE.com. And on Instagram, it's the_LF Experience. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Lauren Friedman. And when I rebrand and everything, the WIGO project will still refer to this link. So don't worry about changing and making any updates. But I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity to connect with you, because what you're doing, like these Mindshift conversations, is so important. Everybody needs to learn and hear about this. And there's not enough people talking about it. So I'm grateful for you doing this and all the work that you're doing to help others find some level of peace.
Absolutely. Good to know. Thanks for sharing that with the audience. And I'm really humbled by your feedback, Lauren. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on today's show as we explore the topic of the ethics of emotional regulation. Thank you for your time and for the valuable contribution you offered to the topic of discussion with the audience of Lauren Omobola Stephen, where Mindship conversations happen. We had a great time indeed, and sincerely from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of the audience, we wish you best of luck in all your future endeavors, Lauren Friedman.
Thank you so much, and I wish you the same. And I just have one more question to ask. How are you healing?
What did you say?
Oh, no, my tagline is, how are you healing? So I just was going to ask one more question. I just want to ask the audience, how are you healing? Because, right, that's what you want to do, is help people find nervous system healing.
Absolutely. We will be looking forward to you providing the resources that is going to be helpful to the audience. We will love to provide that in the show notes as we move forward to the production of the episode, Lauren. Now, if you'd like to catch up with any missed episodes of the podcast, Lauren Omobola Stephen, we offer disruptive yet constructive Mindshift conversations. I emphasize the word Mindshift because these are the challenging times and the dynamic times we are in. We need to begin to move from those kind of paradigms that have kept us in a rut for a long time, to begin to move and begin to have a shift that will really transform us and our lives and the world in general. Thank you for joining me on the show. You can catch up the missed episodes on any podcast distribution platforms or any podcast promotion platforms you bump into online. And do have a great time listening to Lauren Omobola Stephen, where Mindshift conversations happen and be transformed in a night. Till I come your way, I always need you to stay safe. I talk to you soon. Thank you once again, Lauren Friedman. We had a great time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and leave us a review.